Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's fine-tuning reporting project update. My name is Sydney and I'm one of the professional development officers for the Hunter New England Central Coast Primary Health Network. I'm based on the Central Coast, and today I'm joined by my also coastie colleague, Amanda Martin, who is the Commission Services Manager. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we live and work on. For both of us, that is Darkinjin land, and I'd also like to pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Now, a few housekeeping things about this session. It will be recorded and available for you to view on our PHN Education Library. As attendees, your camera and microphone are automatically disabled. However, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, just pop them in the question box, which you will find located within your control panel. You can access that by just clicking that red arrow and it will pop out your whole pane, I guess you could say. At the end of the session, an evaluation will come directly to you. You can fill that in. It's so important to us as it enables us to provide future education. Now, enough of that. And we'll hand you over to Amanda to get you going.
Thanks, Sydney. So thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. As Sydney said, we do want to go through some of the fine-tuning reporting project that we've been doing for probably the last 8 months or so, and just talk you through what some of those changes are going to be for the contracts that you have probably already received or will receive in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So the session today will provide a bit of an overview of some of those changes. It will look at the deliverables that we are picking out of the contracts and then look at some of those KPIs in a bit more focus. But what I do want to say just first and foremost is that there are no new deliverables or KPIs, but you will see a bit of a rearranging of the deck chairs, if you like, through how those KPIs that have been in the contracts for a while now will be reported going forward. So to start off, what I wanted to do is just give you the 3 elements of the changes that will be occurring and to just provide a little bit of context. So what we hoped to achieve by doing this project was streamlining the reporting processes for you as our providers so that there was a minimum, so particularly for those programs that upload to a minimum data set, we will be using that to monitor and review your contract performance as you deliver those services. This is essentially for most of the mental health services at the moment, Headspace, and potentially in the future the psychosocial mental health once those funding deeds come through, but also the youth complex services. Eventually we'll also look to move those AOD services over once the NADA KPIs are a little bit more firm. And for these programs, we are looking, because we'll be using the MDS, Folio will only be used as a by exception for data that might not be collected through the MDS. So Folio is not going away, but it will certainly be significantly less for those programs that report into the primary mental health minimum data set. For those contracts that are not, we're also trying to streamline the existing deliverables and KPIs, and that will impact programs more broadly. Certainly, it will impact how some of those quality KPIs that are in contracts at the moment are reported, monitored, and tracked. But certainly for those contracts that are using other third-party data sources like the CSF Prem that is being used and is well embedded in the, for example, ITC contract, we will not be changing that in any way. And then the third element of the project that we've been working on is to look at introducing a digital Prem for those contracts where there isn't one currently collected. And we'll talk more about that as we get into the presentation. So for mental health contracts, we'll start with those initially, predominantly because they're the largest group of contracts and the largest amount of funding that we have. These deliverables are deliverables that have been in the contracts for many years now, but we're just now pulling them out so that they're much clearer in the contracts going forward. And it allows us to align the thresholds for performance with the PHN program quality and performance thresholds. So providing that line of sight as to how the data is used by the Commonwealth just allows you to understand where your data is going and allows you to understand how that data is being used. Now, the PHN program quality and performance framework is the document and framework that the Commonwealth use to measure PHN performance across the country. And so these thresholds align with those thresholds that are in that PHN program quality and performance framework. The three bottom deliverables are taken directly out of that PHN quality and performance framework, and it looks at cultural competency, follow-up of a client with a suicide risk, and the completion of a matched patient-reported outcome measure, which the Commonwealth mandates as the K10 for these contracts. And those thresholds that are there on your screen are what is required by the Commonwealth. That fourth KPI, which is the introduction of Your Experience of Service Primary Health Network survey, it's a validated prem that is also part of the primary mental health minimum data set, but we've engaged a third-party provider to deliver that on our behalf, and they will administer and collate that data on your behalf and provide that back to you. We'll get to a little bit more of that detail in a moment, but certainly what we're hoping to provide is that the duplication between folio reporting and the primary mental health minimum data set will be removed, because we will no longer be asking these questions in folio. And for some contracts, that's up to 50% of a reduction in the reporting that's required. Contract payments will be linked to achieving these KPI thresholds and also compliance with the existing KPIs. And again, as we get through the presentation, you'll see where those KPIs fit in. We will be maintaining that strong provider relationships, and there will always be that opportunity for the commissioning coordinators at that quarterly meeting to touch base with the services and to get to know exactly how you're operating and what you're doing. There's still opportunities to share your successes and discuss any of those challenges. For those other and non-mental health contracts, you'll see that some of those key performance indicators are slightly different, and the tracking of those will also be a little bit different. So we're still looking to implement that YES survey or that CSF's client satisfaction survey, but you'll see that it's the deliverable is the opportunity for the client to complete that survey rather than any response, because we felt that it was really important that all of the providers had the opportunity to control the performance and get against the indicators and against the threshold, rather than relying on the client to actually respond to that survey. Again, where it's relevant, at a minimum, the YES survey or the CSF survey and a culturally competency threshold will be included in those contracts. And we have tightened up that definition, which we'll go through a little bit later on, about the definition of what a culturally safe service is for clarity. And as you see, there is scope for other deliverables to be added or identified as needed, and particularly that's in the AOD contracts, as I said, once those NADA KPIs are finalised. For these contracts, the non-mental health contracts, we will still be using folio as the reporting mechanism, because there is no minimum data set that we can access. And because of that, the cultural competency and the quality KPIs will be managed through those annual plans, and again, progress will be checked against that quarterly. Again, contract payments will be linked to achieving those thresholds in addition to those targets that are in your contracts. And that level of flexibility, quarterly reporting and quarterly meetings will still exist. So the questions you're probably asking right about now is, what do these changes look like and how are they going to impact the programs that I'm working with? Now, this isn't an completely inclusive list and there may be still some outliers, but we're working through those. And if there are issues that are identified through the commissioning coordinators, we're trying to accommodate changes so that the programs fit in the streamlined measures that we've introduced. But certainly, as I said, probably the largest change is the introduction of a third party to collect the Yes PHN survey. And I guess just talking about that in a little bit more focus is what we've chosen to do is engage Complicity, which is a third party that this is their bread and butter and core business. They work nationally with quite a number of other PHNs, and their work is solely based around looking at patient experience and making sure that the interactive dashboard that they develop is relevant for that. We've chosen the Yes survey because it is a valid prem. It is used nationally and is part of the primary mental health minimum data set. So that will then allow our data to be benchmarked and compared with other PHNs doing the same programs from other areas across the country. But why we've gone with a third party is because it then removes the need for you guys to administer that prem and the time that it takes to follow up, collate the data, and then report it. We didn't go with the PMHC MDS because A, it had some limitations and only provided an aggregate level of data, but it also only allowed us to use the Yes survey in those mental health contracts. So this way, by going through the third party, we can scale that to other contract areas where it's not part of the minimum data set. Complicity will provide that granular level of data that's accessible via that interactive dashboard. And each response to the survey questions, you'll be able to drill down and see those responses that are de-identified for your program area or your organisation if you have multiple programs that are involved. What we will do, and many of you will have received an email from me earlier in the week asking for 2 nominations from your organisation who will be trained and able to access these dashboards. And that will then allow that data to be shared internally. The insights are displayed across each question, as I said, but it also then allows for trends to be identified and some thematic analysis to be done, which is really beneficial in allowing that quality improvement to occur based on patient feedback from your service. The survey will look a little bit different depending on the mode of delivery, but essentially the clients will be invited to complete the survey. Now, this can either be done via a CSF file upload to the Complicity portal, where there is an expectation that the client's name, mobile number and email will be shared with Complicity, or potentially there is the opportunity to use a QR code at the point of service. Now, that could be a sign in your waiting room that clients are directed to at the end of their treatment, or it could be a business card or some other type of resource that is then handed to the client for them to access the QR code and access the link to the survey. It will require, if the data is being shared with Complicity, there will need to be some sort of consent from the client to share that data. But at the moment, for those programs that are sharing data with the PMHC MDS and for the PHN data to be shared, there is a level of consent that already occurs. And so it may just be a matter of popping Complicity into that consent process so that that consent is obtained at the commencement of their treatment journey. On the slide, you will see an example of how the survey will look. And as you will see, the design is branded with our logo, but it will also be personalised, so it references the client's name and the service provider and the program in which they've engaged with. And they'll be invited to share their experience. As I said, all of the responses are anonymous, and any client data will be destroyed after 30 days. So once the client has been sent the link, and if they need a follow-up reminder sent, after that occurs and they've completed the survey, their data will be destroyed. So there's no opportunity for it to be held or compromised in any sort of cyber attack. We're working through the scripts to support that client consent and that participation at the moment with Complicity, and that will also be provided as resources as we get through the implementation. And Complicity will be providing that training to the nominated representatives from each organisation, and more broadly as an overview around what those interactive dashboards look like throughout the month of June. So stay tuned for that one, and we'll certainly share those invitations to the sort of lunch and learn sessions that are planned. And as we said, the KPI that we're looking at is that 50% of clients are offered the opportunity to provide that feedback. Now, whether that's through the YES survey or through the CSF survey or another tool, if it's more appropriate, that's what we're going to be looking at. Continuing on with the KPIs in focus, cultural competency is a significant KPI that we want all of our providers to be achieving so that we can guarantee that we are delivering safe services for all of our population. It has been a quality KPI as a focus area for a number of years now, and so that hasn't changed. And that will either be collected and tracked via the MDS if it's possible, or through the annual planning process. And what we've done for consistency is we've adopted the definition that the primary mental health minimum data set use for a culturally safe service. That means that it's either delivered in an Aboriginal community controlled organisation, delivered by a practitioner that identifies as being First Nations heritage, or delivered by a practitioner in a mainstream organisation that has participated in appropriate cultural awareness training in the previous 2 years. And our expectation is that 100% of our practitioners and subcontractors must be delivering a culturally safe service in line with that definition. Moving forward, this one is specifically for mental health, and it allows us to understand and demonstrate timely access to services, particularly for people that have a referral or a history of self-harm or a suicide attempt. Again, this is tracked through the primary mental health minimum data set, or the HAPPY data set for Headspace. And it's essentially when a suicide flag is noted in the referral, the client is assessed at intake as having a risk of suicide or suicidal ideation, or have a history of a recent attempt. If that occurs and that's noted on admission, in the MDS, there is an opportunity to flag that suicide risk in the MDS. And for those clients where that flag is used, a service contact must be provided within 7 days of receiving that referral. So that's actually not just an appointment, it's actually seeing the client. And again, the expectation from the Commonwealth is that 100% of clients with that suicide flag at the start of their episode must be offered a service contact within 7 days. Now, obviously, that's not relevant for non-mental health services, even though there is potentially clients that are presenting to your services with a suicide risk. And our expectation is that that would be managed as part of your normal clinical governance, and any type of referral would occur from that as needed. And then finally, we've got the patient reported outcome measure, which again, while it will be in a number of the contracts, the AOD contracts and some of the early intervention aged care contracts when they're eventually put out after the tender outcome is known, the KPI may be just performance of the K10 or the K5 on entry, but for mental health contracts, it's a matched KPI in addition to that on exit to the program as well. Now, obviously, outcomes still remain a significant focus of all of our commissioned services, and we want to ensure that the services are producing the outcomes that they're expecting to be achieved and to be demonstrated. The K10, while we accept it may not be the most appropriate patient-reported outcome measure, it is mandated by the Commonwealth. And so at a minimum, the expectation is that the K10 or the K5 would be used. That's for adults. For children, it's more appropriate to use the SDQ tool. But for those adolescents that are kind of in that grey area that might be sort of over that 15, 16-year-old, but under 18, it's at the clinician's discretion as to whether it's a K10 or an SDQ that is used. Again, that is noted in contracts, and particularly for those non-mental health contracts, that will be noted in your contract and can be discussed with your commissioning coordinator. As I said, the initial measure is for some contracts, but for all programs reporting into the primary mental health minimum data set, it is that matched K10 on entry and exit, but the threshold would remain the same. So the expectation is that 70% of consented clients complete that baseline measure for non-mental health contracts. And then for those mental health clients, it's then also that 70% is matched with the measure on exit from the service. And then just finally looking at the other KPIs that we track, which will be tracked by the annual plan moving forward. And again, these aren't new. These have been in contracts for a number of years and aligned to the standard terms and conditions. But what we're looking for is that digital health adoption and the use of the My Health Record and e-referral, and also that participation in health pathways. These have previously been tracked through an annual checklist that was sent out in Q3, but now will become part of that annual plan that will be discussed and progress checked in those quarterly meetings when you're meeting with your commissioning coordinator. We feel that that makes it a much more meaningful interaction because the providers are then able to outline the different activities that they expect to achieve across each quarter, and those activities can then be discussed with the commissioning coordinator and the progress checked as you go throughout the year. They do align with the standard terms and conditions, and so as such align with the resources that are available on the PHN website to support compliance. But going forward, if there are issues, then compliance to these quality KPIs may also be linked to payment. It's our expectation that the activities to support and achieve the adoption are stepped out per year and per quarter in those annual plans, but aiming to support that quality improvement process so that the information and the data that you're getting through those interactive dashboards around patient experience and through the dashboards that the commissioning coordinators will bring to you each quarter then informs that work that's being done in addition to the services that are being delivered. And I guess those revised annual plan templates will be then included in all of the contract renewals that you'll see coming from our contracts team either already or over the next 6 weeks or so. The annual plan template will also be available in the Folio Launchpad if you're using the Folio Launchpad as an avenue to access resources that the PHN have to support the contracts and the services. And like I said, there are also some resources on the PHN website that can assist in moving forward with some of these KPIs. Certainly, the commissioning coordinators are your first port of call for any of these activities that are noted in your annual plan, but we also have a health pathways team and a digital health team that can also support you to achieve those focus areas moving forward. So I guess that brings us to the end of the formal presentation. We do have some time for questions if people would like to raise any questions through the chat box. There aren't any there at the moment, but I'll just give you a few seconds to maybe document some of those. Alternatively, if you don't feel comfortable asking a question here, my email and mobile number are on the screen at the moment, so please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm more than happy to make a time with you and your teams to talk through the changes that are specifically going to impact you, and similarly your commissioning coordinators can also support that process as well. I know I have had a number of conversations with providers over the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks, so I'm more than happy to do that for others as needed. But yeah, there's certainly some time to ask any questions if you've got any.
All right, Amanda, we have had a couple questions come through. First one, can we get a copy of these slides for me to share with the team? As mentioned at the beginning of it, we definitely will have a copy of everything on the education website, but I'm sure as well if we want to email them out to everyone so they can share them. Next one is, if we have any volunteers delivering animal-assisted therapy, will they also need to have done the cultural competence training?
Yes. Yep, they would be a subcontractor, and so there would be a need for that cultural competency training to occur. Now, we're not mandating or suggesting any particular type of cultural competency training. There are some suggested opportunities listed on the website, but what we would think the opportunities would be to ensure that it's local and relevant to the local area. But certainly there are a number of opportunities that are available, either reaching out to our Aboriginal Health Access team, a local community controlled organisation that's operating in the area, or there's some online versions as well.
And I'm not sure if it was a follow-on to that question or just another addition. It did say volunteers are delivering the therapy with the clinician.
Mm-hmm.
And now, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Was it a follow? I'm like, was it a follow-on? Next one, we've got, let's see. Is it possible to get a final copy of what the survey questionnaire will look like to share with our clinical team? They often, sorry, it's a longer one, but I find it. They often get asked by clients about what the questions in the survey are.
Yes, absolutely. It is available on the website, so I'm happy to share the link to the website, which also allows they have a copy of the survey that can be downloaded and used. So absolutely, I'm happy to share that link.
Perfect, and that was all that came through. Oh, we've got another one. For the Yes survey, can we get the QR code or survey link to distribute to our clients via SMS?
Yep, so the email that I sent to all of the organisations earlier in the week asks for the 2 representatives from your organisation to be nominated. It also asks for the preferred mode of survey delivery, whether that be an email, SMS or QR code. So if you can nominate that on that email and send it back to me, that would be great. I can then pass it on to Complicity and we can implement that accordingly.
And then we had another one just saying they haven't received any emails about this, so I'll just make sure to note that and pass on the details to you so that we can make sure that they receive these emails.
And that's it. If you haven't received that email, it may have gone to the person that's responsible for the contract. So in some cases, that's a CEO. In some cases, it might be an executive regional manager or something like that. So please feel free to email me and just let me know that that hasn't been received at a program or an operational level, and I can forward that to you.
For MH services, is MDS now not required at all?
No, the MDS is absolutely 100% required. It's folio that may not be required. So for all mental health services that are entering data into the primary mental health minimum data set, that will continue. But the folio reporting that you had previously done quarterly may not occur. The only time it will occur is if there is data by exception that is not included in the MDS that we're monitoring that contract by. So it may be, for example, in in the transitional care program. One of the KPIs in the program, for example, is return admission to ED or to the acute care facility. That's obviously not something that's captured in the MDS, so that will still occur through folio. But for the majority of mental health programs, the data set will just be the minimum data set that is uploaded to the PMHC MDS.
Perfect. So far, I think that's everything, but please, again, feel free to put anything through. We've got lots of thank yous as well, Amanda. You did a wonderful presentation, so really appreciate all the information that you've provided to everyone.
And yeah, reiterate that, you know, if there are anything that's outstanding, if you want more information, please just reach out to me via email or on the mobile or through your commissioning coordinator as well.
Perfect. Well, I think that is us for today, and we will take an early mark. Yeah, any other questions, email Amanda. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sydney, for facilitating. Great presentation. Great time.
Have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.